Good morning, this is Mr. McMurray, and we are going to go over your skeleton worksheet that you got yesterday and hand out. Hopefully you've got that turned in and got a good grade on it. All right, so a couple things. We're going to start with the main skeleton here. We've got some friends here. We've got Mr. Head here, and we've got, of course, Mr. Bones all lit up back there. So we will look at those as needed, all right? But here we go. Get started with the lower jaw. That's one that moves there. The movable jaw bone is your mandible. All right. Comes apart from your jawbone fairly easily. It's got some things attaching it. All right. Then we have parietal, which is the side up here. You noticed up here. Parietal, if you remember, means wall. So in this case, it's kind of like the wall. It makes the two sides. There's a parietal bone on each side, and that makes the wall, if you will, that keeps the brain in there, in the brain case or cranium. Sometimes we call this part of the brain that actually holds the brain part, the cranium, okay, which makes sense. All right, now, just like cranial. The frontal bone is I could have had a V8 bone, all right here in the forehead, obviously. All right, in front, so pretty obvious why I got that name. On the back of the skull, there's a bone back here at the back, the base. This is the occipital. A lot of times in murder mysteries, when they get bashed their head in from behind in the murder mystery, that crushes the occipital bone. All right. Now, the clavicle is this long, skinny, otherwise known as your collarbone. All right. It's not held in place very good, so it's easy to dislocate, and it's fairly long and slender, so it's also fairly easy to break. Okay. Then you have a scapula. From there, you're kind of seeing the back of it. The scapula is known as your shoulder blade. Let me get this here real quick. Make this a little bit bigger so you can see, but it's the, I can't do that very good. Okay, this big flat bone on the back, okay? That is your scapula, okay, or shoulder blade. All right. Back down there. Okay. So scapula. Going on down. These two together, the clavicle and the scapula, are called your pectoral girdle. In other words, it's where your limbs attach to your body, and they attach to that. Now, the pectoral girdle is more about flexibility. It's not real strong. It's easy to dislocate your shoulder because it just kind of fits into a couple of these little bones here. It doesn't really have a tight socket that fits into like your hip does. So it has opted, it's more built for flexibility, although there still obviously has to be a certain amount of strength there to hold it, but it doesn't have the same strength that, say, your hip does or your leg attaches. All right. Sternum, front breastbone, we'll talk about the parts of that later, but for right now, that's just the breastbone right there in the middle. All right. Your heart is right behind that. Humerus is your funny bone, but if you hit it, it won't feel very humorous. All right, so that is your long bone here on your arm. All right, then you have ribs. We'll talk more about detail about the ribs on the drawing of the rib cage. And you have vertebrae. Now, just for the record, this is a lumbar vertebrae. These are the big, heavy vertebrae at the base of your skull, your spine. Excuse me. Okay. All right. Now, in the hip area, if you touch your hip on the side, you feel your hip bone on the side, you're actually touching the top of this one, which is the ilium. All right, and then the pubic bone is where it comes together in front. There's actually a little bit, see a little strip right there. That's actually cartilage that holds these two together. That's called the pubic bone, which you think about pubic hair. That's back in the area where that would be, the pubic region we talked about. Okay, so that would be there. All right. And then the actual bone, which is actually kind of back down here with a little loop on it and the little hole in it that you sit on, your sit-on bone is your ischium. All right. And so all of these three together make up the pelvic girdle, okay? And as we said before, it's a little more massive. These are big bones here. They have a nice deep socket where your leg bone fits in there. So these are built more for strength. Yes, there's some flexibility there too. Some people more than others. I don't have much flexibility in my hips, but anyhow, people do splits and all kinds of things. It also has to allow, for example, in women, a birth canal to allow the baby to come out. So it's got to have strength, but it also has to have flexibility, and it has to have things like for childbirth and stuff, and allow for that. And so women and men have slightly different shapes to their pelvic area, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. All right, back to the arm again. Notice this is very important. This is the thumb side. Notice this is the thumb side. So the one on the thumb side is the radius. Okay, and if you take your hand and turn it, you'll notice that the bone that turns mostly is really your thumb side one. Okay, it's the one that flips. So that's why it's called the radius, because it turns on the radius. And the other one is the ulna. Okay, so the skinny one on the other side is the ulna. The ulna, just for the record, is actually when you hit your elbow, you're touching your elbow, you're actually touching the end of the ulna. And the ulna actually locks around your humerus. And so that's why you can only go one way with it. You can bring it this way, but you can't go back the other way. If you do, you get hyperextension, and it can be very painful and tear ligaments and do damage, okay? All right, going back here, you have your vertebrae up here. Then you have about 5 vertebrae that are all fused together here, and that is called the sacrum. All right, remember sacral region is down there in the lower back, okay? That's it. In your wrist, you have carpals. All right, a bunch of different ones. They all have names. We're not going to learn them all. You can say thank you, Mr. McMurray, later. All right, then the back of your hand, these bones right through here, okay, from your wrist to your fingers are your metacarpals. Meta means beyond, so beyond the carpals. All right, and then finally on the end you have phalanges. Now there'll be some numbers for those to tell them apart, but we'll talk about that also lately. Also phalanges, you have 3 on each finger, 2 in a thumb. You just have 1, 2, and fingers you have 3. Okay, and we'll talk about their separate names later on, but for now, that's it. All right, at the very tip of the coccyx, you have a couple, what used to look like a little tiny vertebrae that fuse together, and that is called the coccyx, and this is officially your tailbone, okay? Probably part of the sacrum there too, would be considered part of the tailbone, but you know, technically the coccyx is the tailbone. Now in front here, this space, not a bone, but this little space right here, the shape right there where your pubic bones come together, is called your pubic arch, okay? Now we said before, in guys, if you put your thumb and forefinger, guys tend to be more, my brain just went dead, I cannot think. Okay, how do we do that? Guys are more pointy like that, more like a peach finger. Women are more U-shaped. Okay, so V-shaped a guy, U-shaped for a woman, and that's primarily because of a different shape and the way they're tilted so that women can deliver a child in childbirth. It makes it easier for the child to come out. Okay, so a lot of times when you're on a crime show and they find this skeleton that's been sitting out in the woods for who knows how long, and they said this was a whatever age female, well, or male, that's one of the ways they usually tell. They can also tell by overall bone size and structure sometimes too, but if they have the hip bones there, that's kind of the one of the tip-offs to them, whether it's male or female. All right, going down your leg, you got the femur, which is one of the bigger, stronger bones of your body. Then you have your kneecap, which is your patella. It is unique in that it just kind of floats out here. It has tendons or ligaments that attach it to the other bones, but it just kind of floats out here, and that's why you can easily dislocate it. It also makes it very easy if you twist it or get hit hard on it to tear all those ligaments and tendons that hold it together. You got the ACL and the AML and all the different ligaments, medial and cruciate and all that bunch of them. And all of those help hold it in place and everything. But it's, once again, very flexible and kind of floating there. It's not really rigidly held in place. All right, then on the leg, the bigger bone is the tibia. If you feel your shin bone, this would be your shin bone. On one side, you can feel it. Don't feel the other side so much because it tilts back away, but that's the tibia. And then the fibula is a little smaller bone, okay? If you feel on the outside of your leg, you can kind of feel a little bit there. Okay, but it's kind of on the outside there. All right, then going down to the foot, we have tarsals. Move that out of the way. We have tarsals, which are kind of like the carpals up here. So these are your ankle bones. All right, a couple of them we'll go over specific names, but most of them we won't have to learn all the different names. But just for the record, they do have different names. Once again, just say thank you, Mr. McMurray, for not making us do that. All right, then beyond those are the metatarsals, and then finally at the end are your phalanges again. Back to it here. We're going to skip over a couple of the skull pictures right now because I really want to make sure you know the vertebrae. The first quiz we have will be either probably on Thursday, but the Thursday quiz will be over the skeleton, the whole skeleton, and it will be over these backbones here, bones, okay? So a couple things. First of all, let's see what we got. All right, first of all, in the neck area, the first, I believe it's 7 vertebrae. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, 7 vertebrae are in the neck. Okay, they are fairly small because all they have to do is hold your head up. And the top 2 are specialized. We'll talk about them later, but these are called cervical vertebrae. Now, just for the record, they're called C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, and C7. And so basically, they're just numbered from top to bottom, and that's how you know them. Okay, so instead of having to learn a name for each vertebrae, it's just the C1 vertebrae or the C2 vertebrae or whatever, and that tells us precisely which one we're talking about. All right, now in the heart and lung area, again, the thorax, okay, so thoracic cavity, and it's going to be the thoracic vertebrae. Okay, these are getting a little bit bigger. Okay, they have little spots on the side here where ribs attached to them, so they're built a little bit differently. They're getting a little bit more sturdy. On the back, you notice they kind of twist down, which helps kind of lock them together and gives a little bit of rigidity because you have all these weird shaped bones all stacked on top of each other, and the fact that they kind of lock, these kind of lock on the one below it, keep you from being pushed backwards, and it gives you a little bit of stability to your back, okay? And those are your thoracic vertebrae. I believe there's 12 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's correct, okay? And then last but not least, you have the lumbar vertebrae. These are very big, massive ones, got a lot more big, flat things here to attach muscles to. Always remember, if you pick up too much lumber, you will throw out your lumbar, okay? And so you can do damage to these if you try to lift things with your back. And once again, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You only have 5 of those, okay? So you've got 7, 12, and 5, which is a total of 24, okay? All right. Now, those are lumbar, lower back. Then you have the sacrum, which we already talked about in the other drawing, where they've fused about 4 or 5 of them together. And then finally, number 5 is the coccyx. That's the very tip of this little pointy part at the end, which is your actual tailbone. All right. Now, the 2 at the top, you have 2 bones up here at the top with specialized names. All right. The first one is called the atlas. All right. And the atlas's job is to support your skull. Your skull sits on it. Atlas was a guy supposed to be holding the world on his shoulders. Well, this is holding your head on it. Okay. And so it's supporting all the weight of your head. And your head, back of your skull has a couple of smooth spots back here that fit into there, so it fits nice on that groove. All right, now the second one is called the axis, and the axis, there's a little post sticking up, if you will, a little nub on the atlas, and the atlas just rotates around that, and that's what allows you to turn your head one way or the other, okay? And so that's the axis, and so axis, you turn on its axis, there's turned on its axis, so that's kind of where that comes from. All right, so that's all the information that will be on the test coming up on Thursday. All right, now let's go back and look at a little bit of the skull, and then we'll save the rest of it for another day. All right, we're going to start with our quick little tour here that we have time left, about a minute and a half, of the skull with the side view like this one. So if we get to that one, all right, and let's see where we start. I forget which one I did first, so we'll just kind of see how that works. There we go. All right, first of all, your skull, especially the brain case up here, is made of different pieces that have fused together. There's a small amount of fibrocartilage in between here that holds them together, but they're basically all almost like a solid piece of bone. We think of the skull as one piece, but if you look on most skulls, you'll see this suture where they used to be separate when the baby was younger, and now they've kind of grown together. This allows your brain, skull to expand a little bit and let the brain grow a little bit and have a little bit extra size. Also allows the baby to come out the birth canal easier if the things don't fit rigidly. So there's a bunch of different sutures. We're not going to learn the different names for them, although just for the record, they do all have different names. Okay, the parietal bone we said is the side or the wall. Okay, and there's one on this side, one on the other side. All right, and then you have the temporal bone on the side, on the temple. Okay, so if you get smashed from the side, sometimes they smash your temporal bone. All right, and the occipital bone, which is at the back, and also another suture back there. And then up here in the front would be the frontal bone. Okay, and we will stop there and start talking about some of these other ones next time.